Good evening and welcome to Business 7, the program where we look in depth at current issues on the economic and financial landscape. We've got a massively packed program for you tonight. We're looking at investment, we're looking at debt, and we're looking at interest rates. And we've got experts that's going to talk to you about this. It includes Bruce Hansen from Simonis Storm, also Tiaan Bazuin from the Namibian Stock Exchange, and we're going to listen to the Governor of the Bank of Namibia, Iipumbu Shiimi. On the front page of Business 7 today, we look at the prevailing landscape of the business sector in Namibia amid the recession. We're also looking at the biggest problem the sector is facing and what needs to be done to help the sector to help the Namibian economy grow. With me in the studio is Bruce Hansen. Bruce Hansen is the Managing Director of Simonis Storm, who needs no introduction in Namibia, of course, a stockbroking firm, analyst with a rich history, and you've been around since 1996, if I'm not mistaken. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you, Jo-Marie. Glad
Bruce, Simonis Storm regularly does surveys to measure what is going on in the business sector. In your last survey, which was released towards the end of last year, beginning of this year?
End of November, yes.
That's right. You asked the business sector what their expectations are or is for 2020. Now, most of your respondents indicated that they expect their business situation to remain more or less the same.
Yes.
What does the same mean? What is the current landscape of business in Namibia?
Jo-Marie, if you look at probably the last 3 years, you will find that businesses are looking, and as they've done, they would look a year ahead. And one of the things that they've mentioned is the indecision when it comes to policy and the policy makers. So I think that is now, it is something that has become almost normal. So if they look when they looked into 2020, that's what they basically said to us. So when it comes to economic growth, they feel that economic growth will be slower. Some of them felt maybe a bit better than last year. I think the rainfall actually helped. So you're still sitting with a policy environment that's quite uncertain. You're sitting with a lack of skills. Businesses have been talking about, not the number, but the quality of people coming into the working environment. So lack of skills definitely an issue. And then one of the issues that have been consistently coming through, and I think stronger and stronger, is corruption. And with corruption, what you do is you just take away the efficiency of the system. You take away, the innovation. And so businesses still feel that what has happened in 2019 and in 2018, that will still remain because they don't see any movement or any inclination for changes. And if I talk about that, I'm talking about your environment in which you operate. Remember, we need businesses to have a conducive environment to operate in. And those are some of the factors that prompted them to say it will probably remain the same.
If we talk about policy indecision, breaking that down specifically, examples of that, probably your NIF policy, your empowerment policy, the new Investment Promotion Act or NIPA, that's still in the pipeline and that there's a lot of controversy around. And then, of course, Minister Schleetwijn has mentioned tax reforms various times now in budgets, and there's still a massive uncertainty around that and how it will impact on the bottom line.
That's right, yeah. I mean, even if you look at last year, this time, or last year budget time, we were talking about, will there be a dividend withholding tax?
Precisely.
Will there be tax on the unit trust, etc.? Now a year has gone by, and we're still not sure. And one of those, I think the one thing that if I had maybe a lot of money, I would probably have done this and say, if we want to make decisions, can we base those decisions on empirical research?
Yes.
And not just make decisions because we feel like it. Right. So I think that's one of those things where, what you do is you table something, or you bring something to the, you table something, you bring something to the table, but it's not well thought through. Now what we need to do is we need to go back to the drawing board. Now I'm not saying that, every time you'll bring something to the table, it will be something that you can take forward. Obviously you'd have to go back to the drawing board, but I think it's just sometimes, it is not well thought through. And now what we have is, suddenly you'll have to go back, but in the back of our minds, or a business person's mind, suddenly you know about, this might come through. And if you have that uncertainty, how do you want me to invest? How do you want me to employ people? Because I don't know what the future look like. So if I can get a roadmap, great stuff. So let's take NIEP, for instance, or NIEP. Now, I think in Friday's newspaper, suddenly we heard that this thing is going to go ahead.
Yes.
Now, it might not be as draconian as it used to be, but it's still something that now needs to go ahead. And I'm saying to myself, during the times where we had good economic growth, where things were going swimmingly well for us, why did we not at that time made some of these decisions and implement them? Not just that. During that time, we had so many people that ostensibly got rich, but not the broad-based wealth that we wanted to see. So we've made some decisions back then, and now suddenly want to force almost a regulation upon the nation, which should not be there. Right. So you're sitting with Investment Promotion Act. So where are we going? The Financial Institutions Markets Bill, the FIMBIL. FIMBIL has now been in since.
It's the third time being tabled last week.
We're not getting anywhere.
Precisely.
And I think that's what businesses are saying. They say, look, we understand what our role is, and yes, I'm not excusing business at all. But at least, if we can get to a point where we can say, this is the environment, this is the playing field, this is the referee, and now we can go ahead. Then your business can then sit down and say, all right, what should our optimal contribution be?
Also, the private sector feeling, or business specifically, feeling that increasingly their voice is not being heard, there's not broad enough consultation, etc.
Yes. What was quite telling, just maybe to that point, is that in the newspaper this morning, I think your newspaper, that it became Minister Tweya.
Exactly.
Now that's quite telling, because what the minister is saying in that is, we have been put into a stewardship position, a responsible position, where we needed to make sure that that environment is being created. Now it seems like there are some people, and let me tell you this: we talk about government and maybe the inefficiency of government, and people in government not up to scratch, but there is a core of people in government that are trying to do the right thing, that are trying to do well and want to serve, but they are being resisted by some others. And that's what the minister said, we have almost two factions.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Now, if a minister comes out and says that, that's the kind of thing that I want to hear. I liken the Namibian, the government, almost as a household, where father needs to say, okay, let's stop here, this is the situation.
This is enough. We're doing this. Yes,
yeah.
It was an absolute, I have to admit, I was dumbfounded when I saw Minister Tjekero Tweya's comments. He spoke off the cuff, of course. That was Monday when he inaugurated a plant at Walvis Bay, and making comments, for instance, like, we're overtaxing the private sector.
Correct.
It was unbelievable comments from a minister, and coming at a very, very crucial time in this economy.
Yeah. And I think, Jo Marie, once again, that's what we need. Look, I think most people know now that we are in a precarious situation, but it would be good for someone, that's in charge, that comes out and say, this is our situation. What we want to do is we want to do X, Y, and Z, and we ask the nation to rally behind us. Right? But if you still have, you're not sure about policy, you're not sure whether the rule of law will go its course. You know, we have this fish rot thing that, you know, people are, the word on the street is that, you know, they think these people will probably come off lightly.
Yeah.
I hope that's not the case, because we, you know, somehow we must show to, you know, locally but also internationally that we will follow the rule of law, and you know, something will happen. So it's important that you know, a minister or someone comes out and says that, and so well done.
Yes,
I
no,
think well
absolutely,
done.
thumbs up.
Right, yeah, and it was interesting that he said, you know, he might be stepping on a couple of toes, but I think, you know,
then you must step on a couple of toes,
because we need, there's a greater
Precisely.
good at stake, and we need to address the greater good. Yeah.
Coming back to the indecision and uncertainty around policy, the tax implications, the red tape, the bureaucracy, corruption, etc. You also, or the respondents in your report, also indicated that it affects Namibia's competitiveness. Yeah. And that was one of the targets in the Harambee initiative,
yes,
was to increase Namibia's competitiveness, and we have missed that target spectacularly.
Yes, yes. I think if I'm right, I think we're probably now fifth. On the African continent.
Yes.
Now,
and we had to be first.
And we had to be
by
first.
2020.
Yeah.
Yes.
So is someone going to say something about it? You know, suddenly, I mean, the fish rot story came out towards the end of last year. How will that affect now our rating? And not just that, you know, how will we deal with that?
Precisely.
Right. Now, once again, talking about, and you'll notice from the respondents also talking about foreign direct investment, that
yes,
they
yes,
think
the
that,
FDI levels.
Exactly, yeah, they'll probably remain the same, if not worse.
And they're already at historically low levels.
Correct, yeah. So what we're sitting with is, how do you want to attract foreign investors? I mean, you want foreign investors. We need them. So how do you attract those foreign investors if you're sitting with something like this? And not just that, you know, because people are looking at it and say, okay, let's see how they deal with it. And once they deal with it, you know,
then we'll make a decision.
Then they'll make a decision.
Precisely, because one must never forget that the investor's work is to make money. He wants his investment to be safe.
Correct.
He wants to make a profit. And we need to create that environment for him. But the spillover effect of a lack of investment, a lack of business confidence, etc. in the economy, in a very prolonged recession, is unemployment, which in Namibia already is very high. 33.4% in 2018. That was before the recession really kicked in, so we're probably seeing those numbers changing with the next official survey. Your respondents, how do they feel about unemployment? What do they expect in terms of layoffs or hiring new people?
Yeah. So as you said, unemployment at 33%. You're looking at youth unemployment around 46, about 46%.
Staggering.
And if you, as a business, once again, you know, if you think of the future, you will not expand your business. You will not employ more people because you are uncertain of how things will look, you know, a year from now, 2 years from now. So what people are doing is that they're sitting and they say, look, you know, if someone now resigns or a vacancy arises, we will not fill that vacancy. We will rather try and make do with what we have, maybe increase efficiency a bit. But what we've seen from the survey is that unemployment will increase, and probably not at the rate that we've seen, because remember, unemployment is already at a high level, so we're moving from a high level. But I mean, you don't want to move from 46 to 50%. No. You really don't want that. And I think that's what employers are looking at. Now, employers, I'm an employer myself, so we do feel that there's a responsibility for us, you know, to make sure that that unemployment levels decrease. But you cannot invest and you cannot employ people during times like this. And so when it comes to hiring and layoff, you know, I will not hire anyone, and I might not lay off people. But as I said, you know, you might find that, and employers have found a way, so maybe you only have a 3-day week.
Precisely. Yeah. We've already seen some examples of that in business.
Exactly.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it's once again, it's your lower level income earner. Those are the people that are affected the most. And you know, we've seen obviously over the last 3 years, we have seen that, you know, it has touched also on the middle income and some high level income. But you're talking about the very people that you want to serve, the very people that need this. You know, those people are now out in the cold. And so from the respondents, what they're saying is that we will not hire, and if there's any vacancies, we will not fill those vacancies, and we might also lay off people, right? And that then has an influence in unemployment increasing, you know, as people are being laid off. Now the other thing that we must consider, every year you have people coming into the workforce.
Yes, precisely.
You know, come from UNAM, universities or schools, and we complain about the lack of quality that we receive. You know, so that just adds to it. Very difficult situation.
Bruce Hansen, Managing Director of Simonis Storm, thank you very much for your time. It's been very interesting talking to you.
Thank you, Jo Marie.
But the trend now is very discouraging. Even before you do your business, after putting in money without any return, we already want to tax you to death. We kill you even before you start breathing. What type of policies are these? With this type of backward policies, unfortunately, they will take the money elsewhere, where they will be given a chance to grow, to get into business. I'm responsible for investment, and I'm confronted with this type of scenarios. We are not moving together as we claim publicly and through the media. Harambe. We move this side, or we talk nicely in the media, but our actions are in reverse gears. Can we forever change? Support the private sector. Give them the necessary room to do business in the form of different incentives, because they already have made a difference.
We must improve our ease of doing business. If I want to export things from Namibia, how many procedures do I have to go through before I export my things? At what cost do I export my things? If I want to register a company, how many days will it take me to register a company? Because those are the disincentives that can discourage investors from, you know, putting their money into or investing their money in Namibia. And just in general also, the laws that we are busy with, you know, the Investment Act is one of the laws that we have been busy with for quite some time. Investors have raised some concerns that, you know, we need to finalize that law so that we can create a certainty. So if we can create more certainty, I believe we will have a better chance to encourage more domestic investment as well as foreign direct investments. I believe this is the time when we as Namibians have to work together, government together with the private sector, to agree on what needs to be done jointly to create a conducive environment for investment to take place. And I believe that conversation is taking place, it is taking shape, and therefore we must continue with those deep conversations so that we can find better ways that are going to make the Namibian economy more sustainable and more productive.
The Namibian consumer is over-indebted. We hear it at various occasions, and figures by the Bank of Namibia proves it. Now, according to Ceres Capital, the average debt level of households in Namibia is approaching 100%. That means that the average household in Namibia has already spent their entire income for 2021 this year. Let's look at the debt levels as portrayed in the infographic in BIS 7 this week. Now, total consumer debt at commercial banks last year was about 61.4 billion, so it's about 7% more than the previous year. But we need to look at what is driving this debt. We're moving over to mortgage loans. Now, that constitutes the bulk of consumer debt at commercial banks, and that stands at about $41 billion, about 6% more than the previous year. Moving over to the real problem when it comes to consumer debt. Personal loans and credit card debt that totaled about 8.6 billion at the end of last year. Now look at that increase year on year. It is 32% higher than the end of 2018, which means that people have to either take a personal loan or live on their credit cards to pay for their consumption. And just compare that to 2015. Remember, 2015 was the last year that Namibia was not in a recession. And since 2015, you'll see the massive increase in the personal loan and credit card debt from about 4 billion to nearly 9 billion. Overdrafts, another problem. Of course, borrowing from the bank once again to pay for your consumption. At the end of last year, 3.4 billion. That's an increase of about 8.2%. Now, just bear in mind that we've looked at productive debt just now when it comes to mortgage loans. That annual growth was about 6%. Now you're looking at overdrafts totaling 8% year on year, and not to mention your personal loan and credit card debt that has increased by 32% on an annual basis. Of course, it's not just debt at commercial banks that's a consumer problem. There are also micro lenders, and now we're looking at debt for our debt rather at registered micro lenders, and these figures are provided by NAMFISA. Now, the latest figures are for the end of the second quarter of last year, and that shows that consumers borrowed about 6 billion at registered microlenders. Now, that 1% increase year on year might not be a lot, but just compare that once again to 2015, where your debt was 3.7 billion. Massive increase in a relatively short period of time. Very indicative always the average amount that term lenders borrow at microlenders. Now remember, a term lender is somebody that can pay off that amount at the microlender over a period of time. It's usually 3 months. What's very interesting here is that it has increased from 18,000 per time to more than 25,000 per time that is now being borrowed. Now also remember, what is very interesting is that when you go to a microlender, you are limited to the amount which you are allowed to borrow. So when you're looking at term lenders and you're looking at these amounts that we're talking, for instance, more than $25,000 at a time, that is a lender with quite a significant income. We're not talking about somebody cleaning houses or somebody with, we're not talking about low-income earners. We're talking about somebody with a significant salary income every month. Alarming figures, and figures that are watched very closely by both the Bank of Namibia and NAMFISA. Talking stock exchanges and investment in Namibia. With me in the studio, Tiaan Bazuin. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Namibian Stock Exchange. Tiaan, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Tiaan, let's quickly recap on 2019 and the NSX.
Thank you. Yeah, 2019 was an interesting year. We had delisting, which we don't often have, but Bidvest delisted following all the issues in the fishing sector.
Yes.
I think that's been well published already. As much as they exited, we had a capital pool company in the form of Anirep, which is a renewable resource capital pool company, joining the board, main board, or First Developing Capital Board, going to the main board now. And then we had Standard Bank doing a large IPO very successfully. So there's some positives there. Trading volumes were down considerably, as they were throughout the region. Interestingly enough, I spoke to the Egyptian Stock Exchange CEO the other day, and last year was the first year in many, many years that they didn't have any listings at all. So as much as Africa is the emerging market, and we hear the international world talking about wanting to invest in Africa, there's certainly some problems in that as well.
Tiaan, just coming back quickly to Anirep and then to Standard Bank, just quickly in layman's terms, a capital pool company, what is that again?
Essentially, it's a group of people that come together that want to look at a specific industry or area of business that they have specialized knowledge and expertise in. They then raise money on the exchange as a cash shell, and then go and invest that into that business area afterwards, whereby they go back to the shareholders that put in the money and say, okay, this is what we want to buy, this is what we want to do. So the previous one we had was Nimbus, which then ended up investing in Paratus and eventually reverse listing all of Paratus Namibia, now the holding company.
And then Standard Bank Namibia, as you say, massive IPO, a fantastic development for the NSX. The fact that the IPO was oversubscribed, what do you read in that?
Well, there's a lot of captive capital because of the domestic asset requirements, that we know. But I also saw a lot of interest from a retail perspective, which shows that you've got people entering the stock market that weren't previously participating. So I think the educational campaign that went with it, obviously the pricing was good. It's a solid company, has a solid track record. You know, these are the things that people will look at when they're buying, and it means there's still confidence to invest in Namibia by Namibians. Maybe not so much by foreigners,
yes,
but certainly by Namibians. There was one foreign fund, I believe, that also
yes,
applied for shares.
You touched on it, the domestic asset requirements. Just quickly recap for us again what that means.
Okay, so the pension fund regulations stipulate how much of Namibian pension and long-term insurance assets must be invested in Namibia. That's steadily been going up over time. So we've seen too few local companies and shares or equities being available to the market. So a lot of the money then goes into bonds, and most asset managers also have a limit on how much they put in bonds. So in fact, what happens is the money then goes back into the money market account, goes back into the banking system, and leaves the country again in any case. So it defeats the purpose completely in terms of having an overly high domestic asset requirement, which is why we need a lot more Namibian companies to come and list, because the capital is there.
For sure. Once again, why, following on your question, why are there so few or relatively few companies listing on the NSX?
Well, we're a small market to start with, and most of our market is owned by foreign companies. So as much as we've come up with some ideas, there's no Namibianization of our economy. So the Namibian companies that are there, I think oftentimes you find it's family businesses and they don't want to give up power, they don't want to open their books. There's various reasons for that, and that's the same everywhere. But the vast majority of South African companies that have offices here and that don't require local shareholding participation, that's something we've been proposing for a while, is to Namibianize it, to localize it, to have companies come and list, to give Namibians the opportunity to own part of that business.
Because a stock exchange, in the end, is also a mechanism for broad-based empowerment.
Absolutely. So I'll use Standard Bank again as the example. They did an employee share scheme prior to listing, obviously at a lower price. Those shares have now become available to sell, and it's got a market price attached to it. So yes, I think listing as part of empowerment is a massive opportunity. if people understand the benefits that it can bring.
Tiaan, talking about 2020, just quickly, what can we expect? I know everybody is buzzing about MTC.
Sure. Okay, MTC, by the last extension from CRAN, is supposed to list later in this year. Obviously, that's a process that's been ongoing for a while. They recently made new board appointments. I think there's a lot of work being done there. As to exactly when it'll happen, I don't know either. If I get the application, the ball rolls from there. We have not yet received the application. I believe they'll get there.
Looking forward to that. And then just lastly, investment on everybody's lips in Namibia, and the fact that we desperately need it to get the economy rolling again. Your thoughts?
Well, currently there's still the same hindrances that we've had for the last couple of years. We were slowly crawling out of a recession, then the drought hit us. We've had good rains, that's a good sign. The Investment Act is still not has still not been amended and improved. NIEF, by what I've seen now, is certainly not going to help either. As much as the President said the 25% requirement is not a requirement, we're seeing in the bill that I've seen, it'll still be a requirement for licenses and the rest of it, which opens it up again to a much wider audience. Even the constitutional definition of a previously disadvantaged individual appears to have been amended. So yeah, there's still cause for a lot of concern.
Thank you very much, Tiaan. By the looks of it, 2020 rather, this is still going to be a tough year. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That's it from the Business 7 desk for this week. Last week, of course, consumers had a little bit of relief in terms of an interest rate decrease. And we're going to play out with a video from the Bank of Namibia's Governor, Iipumbu Shiimi, and his advice to consumers.
My advice to consumers is that they must not continue taking up debt, especially debt for consumption purposes, because that implies you are spending your future income. And in the future, you still have to live. And if you're already consuming your future income now, it means your standard of living in the future is going to change. It's going to be lower because you'll no longer be able to afford the kind of thing.